Friends and colleagues would often speak of the shouting matches and physical fights that filled their life together. While Bogart himself was not immune to heavy drinking and could be combative, it was Methot's instability that made the marriage impossible. Despite the turmoil, Bogart stayed with her for 7 tumultuous years. Perhaps out of a sense of loyalty, habit, or the kind of fatalistic endurance he often portrayed in his films. However, as his career skyrocketed with major roles in the early 1940s, the contrast between his professional success and his chaotic home life grew starker. Their marriage finally ended in divorce in 1945, by which time Bogart had already begun a new chapter in his personal life that would define him more positively. That new chapter began with Lauren Bacall, whom Bogart married later in 1945. Unlike his earlier marriages, which had ended in disappointment or disaster, his union with Bacall became one of Hollywood's most celebrated love stories. Bacall, nearly 25 years his junior, had met Bogart on the set of To Have and Have Not, 1944, her first film. The chemistry between them was instant and electric, both on screen and off. While some initially dismissed the relationship as a passing infatuation, it soon became clear that their bond was deep, genuine, and enduring. Bacall's youth, sophistication, and grounded personality seemed to balance Bogart's world-weary cynicism and intensity. Together, they became an iconic Hollywood couple, admired not only for their films, but for the authenticity of their relationship in an industry often filled with fake unions. They went on to co-star in several films, including The Big Sleep, 1946, Dark Passage, 1947, and Key Largo, 1948, solidifying their status as one of cinema's most legendary pairs. Beyond the screen, they built a family together, welcoming 2 children, Stephen and Leslie. Their marriage lasted until Bogart's death in 1957, and Bacall remained devoted to his memory throughout her life, often describing him as the great love of her life. Humphrey Bogart was known throughout Hollywood as a man who spoke his mind without hesitation, and while he respected many of his fellow actors, he also had no problem making it clear when he disliked someone. Among all of his contemporaries, there was one individual who seemed to bring out his sharpest criticism and most cutting remarks. Spencer Tracy. Though Tracy was widely praised as one of the finest actors of his generation, Bogart harbored a deep dislike for him, and he did not shy away from telling others how he felt. When asked about Tracy, Bogart once bluntly said, "I can't stand the guy. He's arrogant and he thinks the world revolves around him." Those words reflected not only professional rivalry but also a genuine personal distaste. The tension between the two men stemmed from both personality and style. Tracy had a reputation in Hollywood for being moody, demanding, and often difficult to work with. Bogart, who prided himself on professionalism, despised what he considered Tracy's sense of superiority. "Tracy walks onto a set like he's doing everyone a favor just by showing up," Bogart reportedly remarked. For Bogart, acting was about hard work, discipline, and grit, and he resented the idea that Tracy seemed to carry himself as if he were above everyone else. Bogart's disdain was magnified by the way Tracy was constantly celebrated by critics and the studio system, which Bogart felt overlooked the raw, unglamorous style that he himself brought to the screen. Part of the animosity also grew out of Tracy's reputation as a heavy drinker and a man prone to explosive outbursts. Bogart, who had his own struggles with alcohol, recognized those flaws, but did not see them as charming. Instead, he was openly critical of Tracy's behavior, saying, "He's not some tortured genius. He's just a drunk who gets away with it because the studios need him." In Bogart's eyes, Tracy's flaws were excused and even romanticized, while others in Hollywood would have been punished or cast aside for the same conduct. This hypocrisy angered Bogart, who believed that Tracy's status gave him privileges he did not deserve. On a deeper level, Bogart also disliked Tracy's approach to acting. Tracy was known for a naturalistic style, often praised for his ability to make acting seem effortless. Yet Bogart was skeptical of this image. "They call it natural," he scoffed once. "I call it lazy. He plays the same part in every picture and people act like it's genius." To Bogart, who fought hard to carve out a career through years of bit parts and struggles in the studio system, Tracy's lofty reputation seemed unearned. Bogart valued transformation, intensity, and authenticity. While he accused Tracy of coasting on charm and reputation, the personal dislike went beyond professional grievances. Hollywood was a tight social circle, and Bogart often found himself in gatherings where Tracy was present. Their interactions were tense, with Bogart making little effort to hide his contempt. He was known to mutter under his breath when Tracy entered a room, and more than once he told friends, "If Spencer Tracy's around, you can count me out." He avoided parties or dinners if he knew Tracy would be there, preferring instead to spend time with people he trusted and admired. This avoidance only deepened the rift between them, as it became clear to everyone in Hollywood that the two men could not stand each other. What made Bogart's hatred of Tracy stand out was the contrast with how he treated other actors. Bogart was not an easy man, and he could be cutting in his remarks, but he also had deep friendships with colleagues like John Huston and Lauren Bacall, and he respected actors such as Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney. With Tracy, however, there was no middle ground, no softening over the years. Even as Bogart grew older and mellowed in some ways, his attitude toward Tracy remained fixed. "Some people you just don't like no matter what they do," he explained once. "And for me, Tracy is one of them." Despite their mutual stardom, Bogart and Tracy never worked together on a film, and many believe this was no accident. Studios, aware of Bogart's strong feelings, likely avoided pairing them to prevent conflicts on set. Bogart himself admitted, "I wouldn't last a week on a picture with him. Either he'd kill me or I'd kill him." That stark assessment captured just how deep the animosity ran. It was not simply a matter of rivalry or competition, but a genuine personal clash that could never be resolved. In the end, Bogart's hatred for Spencer Tracy was as much a part of his candid personality as his legendary performances on screen. While Hollywood continued to celebrate Tracy as a great actor, Bogart held firm in his belief that he was overrated and insufferable. His words, sharp and unsparing, left no doubt about the intensity of his feelings. "I don't care how many Oscars he wins," Bogart said. "I'll never buy the act." For Bogart, Spencer Tracy was not just another actor. He was the one man in Hollywood he truly despised above all others. Towards the end of his life, Bogart developed cancer of the esophagus. Since he never went to see a doctor, his condition could not be determined until January 1956. By this time, it was too late for surgery or chemotherapy. He died of the disease on January 14, 1957. Humphrey Bogart really hated him more than anyone else. Humphrey Bogart was born Humphrey DeForest Bogart on December 25, 1899 in New York City. Bogart grew up in a house that was both rich and complicated. His father, Dr. Belmont DeForest Bogart, was a wealthy surgeon, and his mother Maud Humphrey was a successful artist whose work often appeared in magazines of the time. Despite having lots of money, Bogart's childhood was not perfect. He often said his parents were cold and distant, which gave him a sense of independence and toughness that later became famous parts of his movie personality. Bogart's journey into acting was not straightforward. After going to the fancy Trinity School and later Phillips Academy, he was supposed to continue to Yale, but he did not graduate and instead joined the United States Navy during World War I. His time in the military, though short, left a lasting impression on him. The story goes that during this time he got the slight lisp that would later add to his unique rough voice, though stories differ as to whether it came from a war wound, a childhood accident, or simply his natural way of speaking. After the war, Bogart wandered around for a while, taking odd jobs in show business until he finally began working as a stage manager and then as an actor in the 1920s, starting in small theater shows before moving to movies in the late 1920s and early 1930s. At first, Bogart was always cast in films as a gangster or criminal, often appearing as the bad guy in studio pictures. Roles in films like The Petrified Forest, 1936, where he played his Broadway role as the mean gangster Duke Mantee, began to show his potential for something greater. Warner Brothers quickly saw his talent and signed him to a contract, which led to a series of memorable performances throughout the 1930s. Though he was often cast in smaller roles behind leading men like James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson, Bogart's unique screen presence with his tired eyes and sarcastic delivery set him apart from other actors of his time. The 1940s brought Bogart the recognition that would make him a legend. With his breakthrough performance in High Sierra, 1941, directed by Raoul Walsh, audiences began to see him as more than a supporting player. His role as Roy Earle, a doomed outlaw with a surprisingly human heart, showed his ability to bring depth and detail to characters that might otherwise have been simple. Later that same year, his work with director John Huston in The Maltese Falcon cemented his reputation as a leading man. Playing private detective Sam Spade, Bogart helped set the standard for the tough detective character in film noir, creating a character who was at the same time cynical, principled, and endlessly interesting. Of course, No discussion of Bogart would be complete without mention of Casablanca, 1942, perhaps his most lasting legacy. As Rick Blaine, the world-weary nightclub owner torn between love and duty during World War II, Bogart delivered a performance that connected with audiences around the world. His chemistry with Ingrid Bergman, his memorable lines and his tough yet vulnerable manner turned Casablanca into one of the greatest films of all time and made Bogart an international star. For many, Rick Blaine is not just a character, but the embodiment of Bogart himself, tough on the outside, tender at the core, and always guided by a sense of right and wrong. Bogart continued to dominate the screen throughout the 1940s and 1950s, appearing in classics such as To Have and Have Not, 1944, where he met and fell in love with the then 19-year-old Lauren Bacall. Their romance, both on-screen and off, became one of Hollywood's most celebrated love stories. Married in 1945, Bogart and Bacall starred together in several films, including The Big Sleep, 1946, Dark Passage, 1947, and Key Largo, 1948. Their partnership was marked by sparkling chemistry, witty back and forth, and a deep mutual respect, capturing the hearts of audiences who admired them as much for their off-screen devotion as for their on-screen magic. Bogart's career was further distinguished by his refusal to be typecast. He took on a variety of roles, from the cynical but heroic captain in The African Queen 1951, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, to the troubled screenwriter in A Lonely Place 1950, a film that revealed his capacity for vulnerability and complexity. These performances showed that Bogart was not merely a tough guy, but a truly versatile actor who could show a wide range of emotions and human experiences. Humphrey Bogart's personal life, particularly his marriages, reflected the trouble, passion, and ultimate stability that often mirrored the themes of his film roles. His first marriage was to stage actress Helen Menken in 1926. At the time, Bogart was still an up-and-coming actor, struggling to establish himself on Broadway and not yet the screen legend he would later become. Menken was already an accomplished stage performer, and their union seemed to many like a promising partnership of two ambitious talents. However, the reality was far less harmonious. Their marriage was short-lived, lasting only about a year, and it was reportedly filled with intense disagreements and incompatibility. They divorced in 1927. And while little detail survives about the depth of their conflicts, most historians believe that the combination of Bogart's restless career drive and Menken's own ambitions created an environment in which love could not survive. Their brief time together is often seen as an early example of Bogart's difficulty in balancing his personal relationships with his professional goals. In 1928, Bogart entered his second marriage, this time to Mary Phillips, another actress who, like Menken, had made her name in the theater world. Phillips was known for her sharp wit and independence, and her relationship with Bogart lasted considerably longer, spanning nearly a decade. The couple married during a period when Bogart was still struggling to transition from stage roles to the more competitive world of film. Their life together was filled with the social world of theater circles in New York. And for a time it appeared that their relationship provided Bogart with a sense of stability and companionship. However, as Bogart's career began to speed up in Hollywood during the mid-1930s, their marriage faced new strains. Phillips, unlike Bogart, did not want to uproot her life for the film industry, and she preferred to remain in New York rather than follow him to Los Angeles. This difference in goals and geography ultimately led to their separation and eventual divorce in 1937. Although the split was relatively friendly compared to some of Bogart's later marital troubles, it highlighted the continuing theme in his life of career advancement taking precedence over personal happiness. Bogart's third marriage to Mayo Methot in 1938 was by far the most infamous and explosive of his unions. Methot, also an actress, was talented but increasingly troubled by personal demons, particularly jealousy and alcoholism. Their marriage was marked by intense passion, but also by frequent fiery arguments that often escalated into public scenes. Methot earned the nickname Sluggy for her fiery temper, and the couple became notorious in Hollywood as the Battling Bogarts.